Okay, this is the paleontological training fossils for the Pillar Point Harbor Dredging Project. This is specifically for the section on Surfers Beach where grading and fill of beach sand will be happening. This is Surfers Beach looking southeast, then and now. This presentation is presented by Pacific Paleontology, Santa Cruz and Monterey, Wayne Thompson. Project location is in Half Moon Bay, Pillar Point Harbor to be precise, up here just south of San Francisco. Here is the Pillar Point Harbor, Half Moon Bay Harbor, looking northwest on the beach this year. Here's the project in summary and its footprint and corridor right here. Specifically, this is the spot that we're going to be talking about. This is Surfers Beach right here, and here's the grading footprint right there. Grading of the beach sand footprint. These are the layers below the beach sand. These are the geological layers below. The layers that we're going to be dealing with here are Ice Age in nature, and below that there's even older layers from millions of years ago. The layers that we're going to be talking about are hundreds of thousands of years old, not millions. So very, very young, but nonetheless, they do contain Ice Age fossil land mammals. Here's another view showing additional detail of those layers in the project location right here. Well, this is Surface Beach on a rare day in 2025, early 2025, where a exceptionally low tide, one of the two lowest tides of the year, occurred at the exact same time that beach sand was naturally off the beach, exposing these Ice Age layers. There's actually two geological layers out on Surface Beach under the beach sand. These layers are tentatively and preliminarily interpreted as lacustrine or fluvial, that is lake or river sediments. These sediments, one of these layers contains, they both may contain Ice Age fossil mammals, giant mammals. And we're going to talk about the details of that. The two layers are this upper or lower red gravel layer right here and the upper gray mudstone layer. It's kind of confusing. The lower one is upper in the picture, but we'll get into why that is in just a second here. Here's another view looking south from Surfers Beach at that same time. Here's a close-up of the lower red gravel layer, showing what it looks like, the texture, the color, pattern to it. Pay special attention to this because if this layer is encountered, you'll have to stop the grading, notify us at Pacific Paleontology, stop the grading in the area where this was graded down into so that we can inspect it, but continue the grading in other areas. Here is the upper gray mudstone layer. It's been drilled into by these holes are made from drilling clams that live in the rock layers below. Notice the texture, the color, the patterns that you see here. This is also, we need to be notified if this layer is skimmed by accident. let's look at a little bit bigger context of what's going on here. During the Ice Age, because of the dynamic changes in the level of the ocean relative to the level of the land, um, it carved um, uh, patterns into the California, Oregon, Washington landscape that are very characteristic and diagnostic. Um, it's often called the marine staircase, and for good reason. It looks like a staircase. These are the old beach cliffs from the Ice Age, from thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago. These are the ones that are on land. There's also submarine uh, pattern that mimics this one that's exposed on land. We'll talk about that in a second too. But in this case, the older the higher you go, the older it becomes in general. Here's another view conceptually showing um, what happens in terms of the processes. Um, Plate tectonics, where the Earth's plates crash together and form um, mountains and terraces, in this case, are responsible for pushing up the land relative to the ocean level to create that staircase. The other process that is happening at the same time and is overlaid by this is changes in marine sea level relative to the land that are caused by warming and cooling during the Ice Age. So during periods of cooling, the sea level drops because of ice buildup at the poles. And during periods of warming, sea level rises again. This creates this staircase pattern both above and beyond, below the ocean surface. Here's a cartoon view of what it looks like conceptually. Here's today's Surfers Beach. It's built on this old marine platform right here. Here's an older one with the worn down beach cliffs here. Here's kind of a confusing drawing, but important nonetheless, showing that at periods of low sea level, we get these submarine terraces that form at the same time, not the same time, but in the same process as we get the terraces above ground. And these older terraces are what we have on Surfers Beach. We have one of those old terraces exposed, and it was a time when sea level was much lower. In these cases here, sea level was in the neighborhood of 300 feet lower, if you can imagine that. So mammoths would have been able to walk out to, and did indeed walk out to, the Channel Islands. So what we're looking at on Surfers Beach in those two layers that I described is a river or lake environment during one of those what's called low stands, where the sea level was way lower. All right, this is a cartoon picture showing that the mountain building forces have bent the rock layers there on Half Moon Bay Harbor. And it's the bend trends to the southwest. And that's why we can have those two layers in one spot, because they're bent and carved out in plane form right there on the beach. And so the older layer is above the younger layer, the younger gray mudstone. All right, we're going to talk about some of the laws and regulations. Please bear with us on this. The federal, state, regional, and local ordinances are pretty well defined in terms of protections for fossils. Project personnel have an obligation to protect and preserve scientifically and socially valuable paleontological resources. Violation of these laws presented above is subject to federal, state, and local felony and misdemeanor prosecution under these laws. Violation of the federal, state, and local regulations is punishable by civil and criminal, felony, and misdemeanor penalties, including fines and/or imprisonment, and could result in the revocation of project certification, shut down the project at direction of appropriate lead agency. The Paleontological Resource Preservation Act of 2022 is kind of the overarching guiding body at this point. It's based on a foundation of the 1969 NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. In basic terms, NEPA and PaPa protect fossils and as non-renewable resources, and they're considered to be significant, and it's therefore now standard practice to include paleontological resources in NEPA and PaPa studies in all instances where this is a possible impact, such as on surface beach. The 2009 Omnibus Public Lands Act Paleontological Resource Preservation basically says that there are uniform criminal and civil penalties for violation of protections for fossils. There's uniform resource use permits, uniform definitions for what paleontological resources are, fossils, and uniform requirements for curation of federal fossils in approved repositories, and legislative protections for scientifically significant fossils for projects that take place. National Marine Sanctuaries Act also speaks to preservation of paleontological resources, in that it is unlawful for any person to destroy, cause the loss of, or injure any sanctuary resources managed under the law or regulations for that sanctuary, and that includes paleontological resources and fossils, archaeological resource, biological resource, and so on. The California Public Resources Code says that no person shall knowingly, willfully excavate upon or remove, destroy, injure, or deface any prehistoric or vertebrate paleontological site or other paleontological features on public lands, except with the express permission of the public agency having jurisdiction, and violation of this is a misdemeanor. One of the most overarching regulations in California is the CEQA Act, California Environmental Quality Act. Paleontological resources are explicitly afforded protection by CEQA. The treatment of paleontological resources is usually conducted in accordance with guidance from the Society for Vertebrate Paleontology, which creates the guidelines for protection of fossils under CEQA. California Coastal Act also comes into play here with archaeological as well as paleontological resources, where development would inadvertently impact these resources. Reasonable mitigation measures shall be required. California Coastal Act in part authorizes California Coastal Commission to review permit applications for development within the coastal zone, where necessary, to require reasonable mitigation measures to offset effects of that development. And permits for development are issued with special conditions to ensure implementation of these paleontological protections. Based on county paleontological sensitivity maps, San Mateo County Local Coastal Plan 2021 also has protections for paleontological resources. Prior to approval of any development proposed in sensitive areas, require that mitigation plan adequate to protect the resource and prepared by a qualified paleontologist be submitted for review and approval. Also part of the San Mateo County General Plan, County Ordinances, 1986. Regulations of the district protect and preserve significant paleontological resources located within the coastal zone. Guidelines, however, developed to protect the paleontological sites require the use of somewhat outdated maps. So proximity is determined by local expertise. All right, let's talk about some of the creatures that are preserved in our area here. As mentioned before, this was during the Ice Age, and there are what is called mega mammal fossils. These are giant mammals that lived during the last Ice Age, and we're going to talk about some of those fossils that have been found locally. First and foremost, most enigmatic, even today, are these giant mammoths. These mammoths are Columbian mammoths, not imperial mammoths. There's a difference, and they lived during the time when these sediments on surface beach were being deposited. Here's the size of these things. They were bigger than an African elephant, of course. Very large, very hairy, very cool. Here's the teeth of mammoth that are very distinctive. Of course, if a bone surfaces, we should be notified. These are the teeth. This is what they look like. Bones are kind of self-explanatory, but the teeth they look kind of unusual, perhaps. So I want to show a picture of what they look like. Now, these animals were grazers, so they lived in grassland areas and spent most of their time there. And they used these big plate teeth to process grass as grazers, kind of like the role of a cow today. Also present in our area were mastodons. Mastodons were smaller than mammoths, but basically a large, hairy elephant. This is the Pacific mastodon, Mammoth pacificus. Very, very cool creatures that occupied a different ecological niche than mammoths. There's a tooth of what a mastodon looks like. Pacific mastodon. It's conical. It has these cones on it, and these creatures would strip leaves from trees that grew along river channels. So they lived in an ecologically separate biome from mammoths and did different things during the day. And these are one of the cooler parts of the Ice Age megafauna. This is a picture showing giant ground sloths. Two of these ground sloths have recently surfaced in our area here in the Central Coast. Before that, we didn't know that these existed out here on the coast. The first one is this one, Megalonyx. Megalonyx is now known from Half Moon Bay in Santa Cruz. It's often called the common name of Jefferson's ground sloth because ye old Thomas Jefferson was the first person to discover this species. He was actually traveling to accept the presidency with a case of Megalonyx bones in his possession that he was describing. Back in the day, people occupied many different passions, and so little known fact that Thomas Jefferson was the describer of a giant ground sloth. The other ground sloth that we recently came across in the last year is this one, Paramylodon. And it's another small but giant ground sloth. These are about the size of a bison today. There's a intact skeleton of one of these big, giant, but small for ground sloths uh, skeleton here. I'll point out this one, Megatherium, one of the bigger ones, um, uh, was about the size of a small elephant, and they burrowed. They were burrowers, and their burrows were 8 feet in diameter. None of those guys found locally. All right, so what we definitely know is that bison are preserved on Surfers Beach. Um, it's we need more research. We need to study the material more, but it's looking like potentially it could be this fellow, uh, bison latifrons, and bison latifrons was big. Here's a modern bison. You can see how you probably have seen pictures or videos of, or in the flesh, so to speak, a modern bison. Well, here's the ancient Ice Age counterpart of that. These horns are about 8 feet from tip to tip, or the height of a the ceiling in your home. So these are big. There is the backbone of a bison um, found on Surface Beach in the gray upper mudstone layer, showing what it looks like. I want you to pay special attention to the color and the texture and the shape of this. Let's get into some more detail about the bones that are found there on Surface Beach. Okay, we're going to go through some of the fossils that may be encountered on the beach and what to look out for. In terms of what to look out for, you're going to be wanting to look for color, texture, and shape. This is a backbone of a bison that was found on the beach near where you'll be digging. The bone is usually this tan color when it first comes out. The mud on the inside of the bones looks like that. And these bones are embedded in this mud. Hopefully we won't encounter this mud layer when you're digging. This is another view of that same bison bone. This is a caudal vertebra down near the tail, and these bison bones are about 6 inches, 7 inches, 8 inches long. Here's another bison bone further down near the tail. These bison are not like the bison we have today. They're larger and they differ somewhat in the anatomy. Here's another bison vertebra that was found on the beach. This is the tibia of a bison, the lower leg bone, and this is the end that would connect to the upper leg bone. This is just a piece of it, a piece of the entire tibia, a piece of the entire lower leg bone of an extinct bison. Here is the lower left, second, and third molars of one of these extinct bison that was found there on the beach. This is what it looks like. This, of course, is the grinding surface right here. This is from an older individual. Other bones found on the beach could potentially be mammoth and giant ground sloth, as well as a number of other different Ice Age creatures. All right, that's it for now. Those are the types of bones that you might want to look out for. What you also want to look out for are these. These are water-worn fragments of bone. They're small, they look indescript, and they're typically um, they look they basically look like a water-worn fragment. If your tractor breaks one of those in half, it might look like this. These are what are the called the cancellate bone. These are the pores inside the bone. So be on the lookout for this texture in case you get down into that layer. All right, if suspected fossils are encountered during construction, what do? Construction workers should halt immediately construction within a 50-foot boundary radius of any potential fossil find and notify your supervisor, project manager, and paleontologist Wayne Thompson. There's my number. Um, I will come out and evaluate its significance. This applies not only to a fossil, but also to those two sediment layers, which will look distinctly different from beach sand. Failure to report suspected fossils is a violation, fossils or sediments, is a violation of federal, state, and or local regulations and punishable by civil and criminal felony and misdemeanor penalties, including fines and or imprisonment. All right, contact information in case you discover a protected historical fossil or fossil layer. There's my phone number again. All right, this has been a training provided by Pacific Paleontology, Santa Cruz and Monterey, Wayne Thompson. Over and out for now.